So you may have heard that Clarence Thomas, he's in a bit of hot water over his accepting of bribes and his failure to report the accepting of bribes. What's really a bummer about all this is that the taking of bribes themselves isn't illegal. Nothing preventing our Supreme Court from just straight up taking bribes. But what is illegal is not reporting those bribes. It's a strange system we have. We should be advocating for ethics rules that are put in place for the Supreme Court. And we should be doing this in such a way that it doesn't rely on the Supreme Court to put them in place. We should be doing that through our legislature. We're going to get to that after this. But first, let's see what CNN and AOC had to say about it.
Now let's speak with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Thank you for joining us on this holiday Sunday. The abortion pill ruling doesn't take effect for 7 days. You just heard me discussing that with Javier Becerra. The Biden administration is appealing it. Are you satisfied with what you just heard? And what would it mean for women if approval for this pill is revoked nationwide?
Well, you know, I do. While I commend the Biden administration for appealing the decision, and I believe that Secretary Becerra has been doing a phenomenal job in his role, I do think that when it comes to gaming out what the very real possibilities are in the coming days, weeks, and months, this is not just about speculation, but this is about preparation. And the reality of our courts right now is very disturbing. This ruling is an extreme abuse of power. It is an extraordinary example of judicial overreach. The grounds of the ruling are just completely discredited and without grounds. And what we also learned this week is that a Supreme Court justice of this court has been receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gifts and expenses and having lifestyle subsidies by a billionaire who has been funding the same types of judicial organizations that appointed this judge in a partisan ruling in the first place.
I'm going to get to that in a second. I just want to stick with abortion.
That is a good point, and I'm glad, though, that she's bringing it back to the abortion pill. For the record, right now, you can get that abortion pill in just about any state. It's not necessarily legal in just about any state, but you surely can get it. And I welcome bounty hunters to cross state lines and come try to get me in Michigan. Not because I'm going to be a Harvey Hardass, but because I'm gonna use it as a segment on WYCD Wicked. If you can share this with enough folks in Texas, come on, you giant pansies. Yeah, you can get the abortion pill mailed to you. In the VOD, we will, of course, have a link to where you can get that pill popped in the description. And, yeah, it's easy peasy, folks. So if you would like to have an abortion because it's your body, it doesn't belong to the state of Texas, check out the description, and I will have the link there.
First, and what you just heard me ask the secretary about was something that you called on the Biden administration to do, which is just to simply ignore the court ruling. That's a pretty stunning position if you think about it in the abstract, about the notion of just ignoring a judge's position. So my question is, when this case is resolved by the Supreme Court, should the administration follow that decision if that decision ends up banning this abortion drug?
Well, you know, I want to take a step back and dig into the grounds around ignoring this preliminary ruling as well. There is an extraordinary amount of precedent for this. There is a term known as agency non-acquiescence. And this has been used for folks saying this is a first, that this is precedent setting. It is not. The Trump administration also did this very thing, but also it has happened before. The idea of consistency in governance until there is a higher court ruling is not an unprecedented thing to happen. In fact, when the Trump administration did it, it was arguably through a much, a very grave issue when it came to DACA. The Trump administration was ordered to fully reinstate DACA, the DACA program, and they, in a complete defiance, did not do that. They relied.
One thing I love about progressives. One thing I love about progressives is that they do not hesitate to punch back in the same places with the same strength that the other side uses. I cannot wait for the flood of GOP pissing and moaning about the Biden administration not kneeling before this Texas judge. Can't wait for it. And I hope we're going to hear more and more progressives talking like AOC and saying, wait a minute, I didn't hear these complaints when it was the DACA cases. Didn't hear that. Let's get more DACA, as they say. Let's expect our leaders. Thank you so much, Train. Let's expect our leaders to, that's the pain train. It's coming for you, GOP. Let's expect our leaders to be just as aggressive for the cause of decency as Republicans are for pursuing evil. That's the paladin way, Get crunchy with these demons. Slug it out. That's what we should be doing. Hell yeah, AOC. Keep it up, my friend.
The courts rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And when they make a mockery of our system, a mockery of our democracy, and a mockery of our law, as what we just saw happen in this mifepristone ruling, then I believe that the executive branch, and we know that the executive branch has an enforcement discretion, especially in light of a contradicting ruling coming out of Washington.
Should that apply if the Supreme Court upholds the Texas judge's decision?
I think one of the things that we need to examine is the grounds of that ruling. But I do not believe that the courts have the authority to have the authority over the FDA that they just asserted. And I do believe that it creates a crisis. Should the Supreme Court do that?
We do need. I hear all the time about how we should keep these decisions out of the Supreme Court's hands because it's a Supreme Court that's right-leaning. Look, we got to make it crystal clear what we're dealing with. We delay this decision, and as a result, the Supreme Court gets to pretend like it wouldn't have ruled this way or that. We're not going to have people voting with the full set of facts. And I agree, this could get a hell of a lot uglier. Could ruin lives. It could kill people. That's what we're talking about with abortion. It's literally life and death for a lot of people. If you can get pregnant, it could be putting your life at risk. But I don't think that means we keep it out of the Supreme Court. I think we make them make a call. Really, does any federal judge have a right to make a ruling on this scale? Do they really? Can one state decide what the rest of the states are going to do? This is, a Texas judge. Does one Texas judge have the right to do this? The answer obviously is no. Make them say yes or no. I think. And deal with the Supreme Court. Do we want one group of people appointed for life to have this much power over us? I don't. Even when they were making decisions that I massively agreed with, the gay marriage decisions. No, they shouldn't have that much power. People that we say are in charge get that much power. And even then, not for life. Not for life. So at a minimum, 2024 comes and goes. First of all, look, country survival depends on this. We need blue House, blue Senate, blue White House. That simple. And when we get that, because we are going to fight viciously, and we are going to take that. So when that is ours, when we hold that territory, pack the courts at a minimum to deal with the immediate problems that we have. Pack them. And then change the way they work fundamentally so that we do not have multiple decades-long positions on the Supreme Court. Enough is enough. Let's let AOC keep
would
going.
Essentially institute a national abortion ban because you have an extraordinary amount of states who have implemented surgical bans or bans after very early time periods. And then if you pair that with a mifepristone ban, then we will essentially have a ban on abortion. There are certain workarounds. I will admit there would be certain workarounds, but we would have taken a very significant step towards a national abortion ban. Once you ban medication abortion, which represents, or start banning medication abortion, which represents the overwhelming number of abortions in the United States, then we are in extremely dangerous territory. And I would urge the Supreme Court, in its lawlessness that they are exhibiting right now already, their extraordinary conflict of interest, my hope would be that we do not get to that point. But if we do, I do believe that we must start to push back on our system of checks and balances, which is designed to push back on should there be an example of judicial tyranny and judicial overreach.
Let's talk more about the Supreme Court and what you mentioned before, which is that Justice Clarence Thomas, you want him to be impeached after a new ProPublica report this week revealed that he accepted luxury vacations from a Republican billionaire donor without disclosing them. Thomas is now defending himself, and here's what he's saying. He's saying, quote, "Early in my tenure at the court, I sought guidance from my colleagues and others in the judiciary and was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was reportable."
I'm not going to go into it because we did a whole video with the wonderful David Feldman. But if you want to see what we think or what I think about the personal hospitality comments, as opposed to gift, as opposed to bribe, that's from Salty Saturday.
Was not reportable, rather. What is your response?
I think that his own statement contradicts many of the facts on the ground and also raises in other ways even more serious questions. Later on in his statement, he stated that the reason and the rationale for this exemption was personal hospitality from an old friend. And he said himself in his statement, a friend of 25 years. Justice Thomas has been on the court for 30 years. And so to say what he is admitting in his statement in an attempt to defend himself is that he began this relationship with a billionaire and receiving these sorts of gifts after he was appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. I think that in and of itself indicates a very, very serious problem. And then on top of that, he is now implicating his colleagues. And I do believe that Chief Justice John Roberts must now come forward and state if he allows and is allowing this kind of very serious corruption to happen on this court. I think, when it comes to Justice Thomas's statement, when he's talking about his colleagues and when he's talking about who advised him to break the law, I think we need to know who those people are.
Did the Justice Department investigate?
I mean, I believe what we're seeing right now is a breaking of the law, and we have to examine what institutions. I know that there are calls for Chief Justice to.
Whoa. Let's stick with that one point for a minute there. We should know who advised Clarence Thomas to break the law. So often, and it's an all politicians or politically involved people thing, sure. In fact, it's an all anybody who's got cameras pointed at him thing. They say, somebody else said to do it. Rather than spending all this time trying to figure out whether or not the person is lying, I think the best answer is just to say, okay, you want to pass the buck? Cool. Who? Who told you that? They told you to break the law. Who said it? I mean, he talks about how he became friends with this guy after he was seated on the Supreme Court. Or at the very least, after he was a judge. Okay. Clarence Thomas, you want to pass the buck? Pass it. That doesn't mean we're going to stop chasing it. Tell us who. It makes them deal with the core issue. We do it, yes, so we can find out who's corrupt. That's great. That's a great reason to do it, too. But we're also doing it so that they have to deal with the issue. If they're pointing fingers, say, okay, you are increasing the number of people who we're going to go after. But what you're not doing is stopping us from chasing this down. Because we have to deal with the people in our government who think this behavior is okay. And if you don't have the guts to take responsibility for it yourself, fine. At the very least, that means, I guess, you're not defending it. Good. So show us that unethical clown that told you, Clarence Thomas, that told you that taking a $500,000 trip wasn't taking a bribe, because they lied.
For the Chief Justice Roberts to initiate an investigation, I do not think that this court any longer has the legitimacy, especially after the Supreme Court leak last year, which never came to a conclusion because the investigation itself that Chief Justice Roberts started back then, I believe is very discredited by naming a position that has an inherent conflict of interest because it is employed by those justices.
She got too wishy-washy with it. Look, there was a investigation into leaks, and then all of a sudden, Supreme Court threw the brakes on that. Don't put up with that. In fact, reach out to the most MAGA-leaning people you can and say, hey, remember that investigation into the Supreme Court leaking? We should start that up again. You should contact your politicians and say that you want to get to the bottom of this because they were so damn sure, weren't they? They were so damn sure that the leak was coming from the left side of the court. Left being a real generous term for those folks. Well, let's find out. What do you say? Let's find out. Thank you, AOC, for bringing that back up.
I believe that, and it is the House's responsibility.
And CNN can't stand it.
Ability to pursue that investigation in the form of impeachment.
I also like that she's putting pressure on the House. I can't stand when Republicans take control of something, and so we just say, all right, well, that doesn't have a responsibility to be ethical anymore. No, we should be pressuring the hell out of our politicians, arguably more so when the right controls whatever lever of power we're talking about. They don't get a pass just because they've agreed to be on the bad guys' team. All right. people that would dare sign up for the villains? Show us what you're going to do about this. Make them say that they are going to defend this behavior, in other words, because they are going to defend this behavior. Make them say it. Make them go out and try to come up with a reasoning for why they're going to support this person. And make them stumble and mumble and tumble because, baby, they can't do it. They just can't do it. And they will look foolish. It's just like the woke talk. Why are there people sick of them talking about woke stuff? Because it doesn't make any sense. Congratulations to AOC for forcing him into a corner here.
Let me ask you, I mean, you know full well that the House is now run by Republicans. How are you going to move what you're calling for, articles of impeachment,
I don't care,
through a House that is run by Republicans?
Yeah, I think there is the question of the politics of what we are doing, and there's the question of the course and the accountability and the structures of what we are doing. I admit it is very difficult to see a path in a Republican Party that refuses to hold itself accountable and, in fact, breaches the law itself. For all of their talk of a crime wave and Republicans talking about crime waves across the country, the crime wave is within the Republican Party. It is within all of the what we are seeing. We are seeing breaking of the law by conservative members of the court. We are seeing a former president of the United States just indicted in recent days. I mean, we need to hold our systems accountable, and I do not believe that we should be refusing to do that for political reasons. I believe that we should pursue the course, and if it is Republicans that decide to protect those who are breaking the law, then they are the ones who then are responsible for that decision. But we should not be complicit in that.
Now let's speak with Congresswoman.
And we should not allow them to get the kind of cover that they get, the cover of silence. In fact, let's go to the big screen. Let's do it. Yeah, they get the cover of silence. When a Democrat sees an issue, they're expected to respond to the issue. The only times they are allowed to just stay quiet is when it's something like Pete Buttigieg not doing any real regulations against transportation companies. But never on. Well, even then, as I say that, I'm thinking, no, the people on the far left hold them to account. No, but Republicans get this unique advantage where it's just accepted that they're on the side of the villains. And so they're not asked for their opinion. They're not certain. No one would dream of asking them to vote on it. How embarrassing would that be for our Republican friends if we asked them to go on the record voting against gun control? We already know it won't pass the House. There's no reason to demand in the House that they put their names to that evil. That's a needless way to embarrass them. Of course, that's what we want to do. Of course. If they are the problem, we need to show the American people they're the problem. If Clarence Thomas is corrupt, and we know the House will do nothing about it, we should make Kevin McCarthy have to say no 30 times to 30 different bills that would be proposed to take this clown out. Look, I disagree with a lot of what the media says about the mythical Obama to Trump voter. There aren't as many as the media suggests, but they do exist. I'll never forget, Ashley Babbitt was one. She apparently voted for Obama twice and then was so into Trump that she was willing to get shot to death in the Capitol in order to reinstall him. She participated in a coup. But she voted for Obama twice. Why does that happen? That happens because there are a group of Americans who don't really follow politics at an academic level, but they do see corruption. And we should be auditioning for 2024 to them. Who are the corrupt ones? The GOP. Yeah, you could say corporate Democrats, but when it comes down to the raw, real corruption that we're looking at, not just taking money from X and so you don't dare legislate against them, but straight up putting a criminal in as a judge. Straight up politicians taking bribes, etc., etc. That's the Republican Party through and through. And you need to demonstrate that. And the way you demonstrate that is by forcing them to go on the record about it. You can do that on the media. You can do that in Congress. Tell your representatives that you support impeaching Clarence Thomas. Tell them that you want it brought up in the House. There will be a link in the VOD description. Use it to contact your representatives. Tell them that you, at a minimum, want to see that Kevin McCarthy had to say no to talking about this time and time again. At a minimum, you want that done. Put the pressure on him and make them reveal to America who they are. Mars Falcon says, instead of asking why Republicans hate Law and Order, Dana Bash tried to smack AOC with a "you can't do nothing" sideways swipe. Yeah, CNN is going way more into the whole hey, Republicans, go for us instead of Fox side of things. It's real sad to see. It's sad to see. But they're going to keep doing that, certainly.